This is how to convert live drums using DRT in Pro Tools. So I have a session here. This is a live recording. This is probably as hard as it will get. Let's take the track that we're going to be converting to MIDI. Here's the snare. I do have a little bit of processing on it. Here it is with nothing. It's a live snare. The drummer has lots of dynamics. It's about the energy of the show, right? So he's not concerned with getting every little hit perfect. This is why it's going to be difficult. First steps, I like to go through and normalize the tracks. In this instance, it's a whole concert. I'll take the entire track. We'll go to Normalize. I like to do -1, hit render. We'll do the same thing with the kick while we're at it. Now we have the selection. This will help it analyze it much better. Yeah, much better. I'm going to make this its own region here just by separating that. Command E on Pro Tools. Now I'll go and open up DRT. The first thing you want to do is click Analyze with the region selected. It'll give you a bunch of stuff like this. Now we will go through and try to find a solid snare hit. That's a good one right there. The reason why I didn't choose any of those ones previously is because it had kind of like the rough of a ghost note behind it. Now we're going to go to this Learn tab here, and I'm going to hit Learn. Now this tells us that that is a snare hit, and it's got its transient right at the beginning. So now we can go and see what it did automatically. So we don't want those. We can tell that it's picking up some extra stuff. So we want to start sliding this up. That looks pretty good there. A trick that you can do with DRT is whatever your selection is on your track, that's what it will zoom in on. If you want to say zoom in on these little fill right here, you can just select that little fill. And if you want to get more granular, then you can zoom in Pro Tools and then zoom in there. But this looks all pretty good so far. Little piece there. So what I might do is come back over to the timeline and click on this little guy here, and I'll slide my gate up. This is just almost like a threshold for what it's going to determine is a hit or not. That is a ghost note, and I will need that later, but right now I'm just concerned with getting the main hits. I'll probably do another video on how I handle ghost notes, but this looks like it's got everything pretty well without me having to tell it to do anything. There's a couple different ways we can check to see how well it got everything. Bring this up a bit. Just kind of gonna go through the whole track and make sure it got all the hits. Yeah, like that's a ghost. I'll call that a ghost because it's a ghost velocity almost. Yeah, but it's getting everything. This is pretty good, actually. This is surprising. Sometimes a live performance can give you problems. In the studio, everything's easy because you're focused on playing perfectly. So the next step would be to create a MIDI track to where this is going to go. So I've done that here. I've created 5 MIDI tracks: kick, snare, tom, tom, tom. So this one is going to go on to our snare track. Select a note, and we can drag it onto our snare MIDI track. Now I'll just drag it over here so you can kind of see this a little easier. This shows you all the velocities. You can see that this is not lined up, and if we play it together, it's a mess. So what we can do is go over here and make sure this says clips. Now this shows you your region. Now part of the reason why I wanted this to be its own region here is because now with this region selected, we can hold down Control and click, and it will snap to that grid. Now this is lined up. Now we're going to go through and check. I like to put this on velocity, and I'll show you why in a second. But first, let's go over what we've done. We've already made sure inside of DRT that it's picking up every snare hit that's a major hit. So now we don't have to worry about scrolling past any hits that should have been there. For this step, we're just making sure that everything is completely phase accurate. So what I'll do is go down to my Midi Track. It's important that you click on the Midi Track, and I'll hit tab, and I'll zoom in a little bit on the snare here. And you go through each hit and you make sure that every hit is perfect. Now, there will be a difference in the length of the first waveform here. The main thing that you need to figure out is what the average is. So like the beginning of this, you might think that it's over here, but on average, we can say this is 61 samples. But the main thing is if you get some that are really short, like that, sometimes some weird rim shots can be a different opening envelope, and like that, maybe he's hitting a kick and a tom at the same time. I'm not sure what that is. You'll just have to kind of use your ears for those. So we can either go through and tab through each one, make sure they're good. I'll usually go through and use my ears as well as this because I do think that it's important to go through each and every hit because there's nothing worse than an out of phase sample or samples that are mistriggering. It is the absolute worst. In my opinion, the way to use samples is to enhance and make them invisible. Okay, so this looks good. Another way to check if you got everything, if you don't feel like exporting the clips first and then checking, what you can do is go through in DRT and tab to transient and see how close you got it here. You can move to be like exactly on, but I've found that the problem with doing that is when you tab to transient, you'll sometimes land on a mistrigger that is not actually a transient. So this is registering the kick bleed as a transient. So you'll end up having to hit so many more tab buttons than necessary in order to get the same results. I prefer to export the MIDI onto a new track and then simply tab with the velocity engaged. And that gives you starting point indicator of where the region starts, which is also very nice. So you can always kind of have this visual right here. And if you go like that, super zoom, it's really easy to see that you're at the start of the waveform. And the more you do this, the more your eyes will kind of get trained to where you can just blast through these and it doesn't take very long at all. That's how you convert live drums to MIDI using DRT. It's very fast, very easy, very simple. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.